So you know what term gets thrown around a lot nowadays in the whole education world? It's school projects, right? It's this idea that teachers should be having their students do more hands-on work and essentially create projects. And every teacher knows that, yeah, that sounds great, but projects usually end up being something that we only have time for at the very end of a unit. And it's usually something like a diorama after reading a book, or maybe we have a dress up day, or maybe the students create a scale model of whatever it is that they talked about and learned about and wrote about for the whole unit. At the very end, they create something. And as a teacher, this is like another thing that you have to grade and assess. It's another thing that you've got to collect, and it's another thing that's taking up the precious spare time that you have as a teacher. Projects sound really great on paper, and they seem to get pushed on teachers a lot. But a lot of people don't realize that projects are often like the dessert that comes after the meal, right? Like it's something, it's fun, it's engaging. A lot of students love to do it, but it's a dessert. It's not actually necessary for the learning that happens. Are you with me? But then there's another type of project. It's like the main course project. It's the kind that gets introduced at the very beginning of the learning experience, and it's required the whole way through, as in students don't actually learn everything they need to learn unless they're taking part in this project. And I think that we've got to make sure that we separate these ideas and the conceptions we have about projects into two categories. There's the dessert that's fun but isn't actually necessary. And if it's not necessary, it's probably not worth our time. And then there's the main course. You know, I've had my students do this project with refugees for years now, and essentially my students are creating these products to help refugees assimilate into our modern culture. And so they're creating flashcards for how to use household appliances, or maybe we have students that are creating how-to videos, how to use the local bus system or the local library, and they're making these resources. And while they're doing that, they're learning about the plight of refugees and what refugees have to go through. And then maybe we'll even dive into the Industrial Revolution in my history class and learn about these big concepts of technology and innovation and developing societies and all these things that they were going to have to learn anyway in a regular class. But now there's this project, this authenticity that's hooking it the whole time. And so my students are motivated to do something beyond themselves. They're motivated to serve somebody and be a part of real change and action. And in the process, they're learning, right? They're learning this content. And they wouldn't learn the content in the same deep and meaningful way if they weren't taking part in the project, right? It's almost like if you think about it in story, every story has to have some type of conflict in it, right? Otherwise, it's not really a story. If I was like, oh, I have got to tell you about the day I had. I woke up, I went to work. On the way home, I stopped and got groceries, went home, watched some Netflix, and then went to bed. You'd be like, that's not a story, right? Like that's not even interesting. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Matter of fact, I feel dumber now having heard that because it's so bad. Okay, maybe not that intense, but right? You'd be like, that's not a story. Why'd you tell me you were going to tell me a story? Because a story has to have conflict. Something has to happen in it. And I think about that with our classrooms. If we want our students to really be engaged in the content and subject matter we're teaching them, they've got to be introduced to real conflict. You know, there's got to be real problems that they have to solve. And if we're creative and we take time and spend some of our energy figuring out how can we take this problem that they have to solve, whatever it is, and tie in the content to it, so that they, while they're solving these problems, while they're engaging in the conflict and part of this story, they're also learning history or math or English or science or whatever it is that you're teaching. And so I think it comes down to making sure that when we talk about projects, we're not talking about those desserts that come at the very end of it that aren't really necessary, that are more like assessments, right? More like ways of finding out what did students learn. But then also talking about main course projects, the kind that engage students from the very beginning, that are there the whole time, that aren't a waste of time because of this project, because of the problem that students are solving, the learning is happening. Kids are hooked from the very beginning and the whole way through. So if you want to learn more about how to do these main course projects, I would love to start talking more about it with you. And it could start by looking at my book, The Epic Classroom, which is all about using the power of story to create really engaging main course projects in the classroom so that we can stop dogging on projects all the time that are actually just desserts. Thanks for tuning in. Can't wait to bring you another video next week.